Hopefully you can hear me. And hopefully this microphone's working. There we go. Fantastic. Thank you so much for coming along today. If you are here in person in Portsmouth, it's lovely to see you. If you're not here in Portsmouth, we're sadly not on the sunny coast. It's actually quite grey and windy outside. But it's still absolutely fantastic to be at the great waterfront city itself. If you are joining us online, you should see that you can ask questions. So please do make use of that functionality. A member of our team will be monitoring those questions and making sure that we're taking sort of evenly from in the room and all around the country, and indeed possibly further afield. This is the third year we have launched the National Delivery Plan, or now National Delivery and Advocacy Plan. This is a very special year that we're in, because not only is it drawing us to a close of phase 1 of the NDAP as it now is, and starting off phase 2, quite a lot has changed since that first launch event. We now have the DCIT Digital Inclusion Action Plan, which I think many of us within the digital inclusion community and undoubtedly beyond see as an absolutely fantastic opportunity to start building on some real, genuine momentum. So moving away from promises, moving away from bits of activity happening here and there, to a concerted, cohesive strategy that we hope will be coming out from the government to tackle this issue. And that will be cross-departmental. One of the elements of that action plan that is very special is that actually this draws across a whole range of different departments, including the Treasury, including the Department for Education, including housing, local government and communities, all of these different pieces of government coming together. It's also, for us, when we do these launches, a bit of an opportunity to move around the country. So year 1, we were in London and then we were in Leeds. Year 2, we were in Carlisle. Year 3, we're in Portsmouth. And this is about really reflecting on the differences that there are in the digital inclusion landscape all around the entirety of the UK. This builds on lots of events we do elsewhere. We don't only go to England. We were in Northern Ireland a couple of months ago. We were in Wales at the start of the year, and we've got some activity coming in Scotland soon as well. Portsmouth is also one of the areas that we pulled out in the report that we released last week, looking at the digital inclusion landscape. And we're hoping to be working more in this area about ensuring that actually the support that's out there can be made more accessible to people living within this area. It's also a really interesting week from a policy landscape, not just because we're releasing our NDAP, but because actually there were 3 separate government announcements yesterday, all of which touch on what we're talking about here today. And you might go, it's a little bit tangential. Maybe it is a bit tangential, but the thing is, it all comes together. Skills England, not tangential. I think that we can all appreciate that the need to ensure that foundational digital skills are a really important part of the Skills England work. That has to be fundamental. And I know that when we get on to our skills panel a little bit later on today, we're going to get into that in a bit more detail. There was the Strategic Defence Review. You might go, okay, that one is a tangent. But actually, a big focus on that is around building those essential skills. And there's a big focus on digital, and there's a big focus on emerging technology. We're here in Portsmouth, arguably the home of the Royal Navy. Let's remember that actually people coming through who are going to be supporting that review need access to those skills, and they need access to the devices and the connection and the confidence to be able to build careers that will support that. And then completely at the other end of the spectrum, we had the digital switchover telecare campaign go live on TV. Don't know whether you saw the ads last night. If not, you should, because that's the whole point of the TV campaign. This is around the changes that we're going to see in landlines, and exactly how, therefore, people, particularly older and vulnerable people, are able to access connections, particularly in the sense of telecare, particularly in staying safe at home, but also if for any reason you struggle with a router, if you struggle with setting up new equipment, making sure that you've got the support you need for that. So, as we get on to the plan itself, we have some key messages. Now, you will notice there's a trick here. I can't actually see the screen, you can. So, our first key message is that delivery defines success. So this is really reflecting on the DSIT new Digital Inclusion Action Plan, but it's going to be those next steps, it's going to be the action that comes out of the action plan, rather than the document itself, that can actually shift the dial here. Digital access is a basic right. This is unchanged. We have been saying this since the start, but we cannot hammer it hard enough. If you cannot get online, you are fundamentally disadvantaged in the UK. Therefore, we have to see that digital access as being as essential as any other utility that you might have in your home. And local action drives national change. Now, it is hugely important. It is critical that we have the society that we need, that we have government shining a light on this, that we have the convening power of government and industry and charity leaders and every element of society. But it will be local people who will actually create real change. And that is something that is absolutely fundamental again throughout the plan. And I'm really glad that we've got some local expertise on the skills panel a little bit later on. There's also a few particular actions that we are drawing out. So you should have a copy of the National Delivery Plan sitting next to you. Take a flick through it. Certainly make sure that you read it on the train heading home, but there's a few things that we really do want to ensure that we get your attention on. One is our inquiry into digital inclusion and health, and again, outside, if you're here or online, I think there's going to be some links posted that will take you to these particular elements as and where we've got bits. The digital and health inquiry is... I've broken it. There we go, it's back. Is really focusing on ensuring that we can understand now this intersection between whether you are digitally included, where you live in the country, potential life stage barriers, potential language barriers, and whether you can access the healthcare that you need at the life stage you are at, or whether digital is creating a barrier or an opportunity. This, we have a literature review, do grab a copy of the report, but what we really need is voices. We need patients, we need clinicians, we need anyone who's had any experience of working with the health sector to get involved in this. You can see there, submissions are open until the 30th of July. Second thing that we want to make sure everyone's very clear on, every child needs a laptop because education is growingly moving online. Whenever we talk to teenagers, whenever we talk to children, they are expected to be completing digital tasks at least once a week. They're expected to be doing their coursework online, coursework for high-stakes examinations. This isn't a nice to have. This is fundamentally, you are going to do less well in key exams if you are not online. We also found, parents said 86% of the time that their child was more engaged after they received a laptop from us on our Tech for Families scheme. This is something that is absolutely critical to modern education. Making essential services free to access. We are looking at how we can work with communications providers to amplify the idea that if something used to be free, if you used to ring an 0800 number, why are you now paying to access that same information? There's a perception if it's online, it must be free. But actually, it's not, because accessing data costs money, and for the most vulnerable, commonly they'll be using mobile data. That runs out. And finally, on the sort of big call-outs we're doing today, we really want to encourage industry to think about the realities for your workforce. And I know that this is something that Future.Now are really focusing on, and we've got Liz here. This is about how employers have a critical role in ensuring that people aren't left behind. Now, part of this is skills, but part of this is also access, and part of this is accessibility. Part of this is whether people have the internet at home. So this is that package, and we will be talking a little bit later on as well about our Charter for Digital Inclusion and how employing organisations can sign up for that. So we are now going to move over to a little team panel. So I'm going to ask some of my colleagues to come up onto the stage. Hopefully, you've got some questions in mind. Otherwise, this is going to fall very flat. So if you're in the room, please do have a think about that. And if you are online, please do use that little YouTube chat functionality to get some questions coming in as well. Who'd like to kick us off? I said this was going to fall flat, guys, if somebody didn't ask a question. Oh, fantastic.
James Kirby, Portsmouth City Central. I recently worked very hard to get our organisation some very basic laptops, including approaching Dell, Lenovo, every single manufacturer I could. And a solid wall with every single one of them they didn't want to know. Is there any way that people of your stature and your standing can actually reach those manufacturers at an appropriate level in order to give out basic machines? Dell, for example, are launching a very high-end set of new laptops with higher prices and higher specs for AR. That means they've got loads and loads and loads of old kit that they need to ship, but they wouldn't give me one. But this applies to every single organisation. There's kit out there, we just need access to it.
Absolutely. So I'll respond to that quickly, and then Joel might want to sort of talk a little bit about the work we're doing with DCIT to repurpose laptops. I think the difficulty with manufacturers is every charity, every local authority is unfortunately, and as are we, and we won't stop banging on their door, going to these people and saying, can I have kit, can I have kit, can I have kit? Where we are actually seeing much more traction is in working with other organisations that aren't the manufacturers, other organisations that have had Windows 10 laptops, for example, and now what are they going to do with them? There's thousands, tens of thousands of these devices lying around the UK. And actually, organisations are being told, you know what's a really green thing to do with that is to recycle it. Don't reuse it. It's green to recycle it, to get the precious metals out of it. The greenest thing you can do with an old computer is reuse it. If you think about that, all the conversations we used to have in the 90s about recycling, actually, reuse was first on that little triangle. So that is what we are trying to do. I think with the manufacturers, yes, there's always an opportunity, and we are always super keen to work with them. We do a lot of work with Currys around, from a retail perspective, in terms of getting donations in to be able to buy these. We work with people like Computer Recyclers UK, who provide lower cost machines, so still high spec, but subsidised. But for us, I think it is that second-hand device donation that really helps. But Joel, do you want to say a little bit about the DCIT pilot?
Yeah, absolutely. And we were speaking before, weren't we, about how this really is sort of an entrenched problem that often goes unrecognized. And recently, we were very privileged to partner with DCIT on this National Device Donation Scheme. Again, because it's going to take a coordinated cross-sector approach to really move the needle in the right direction within this space in particular. And I think, certainly the team can be quite proud, because we do have the expertise in this specific area, having just wrapped up our RBKC device donation scheme, as well as one in Ealing. So again, there is no panacea, there is no one solution to this, which again is something else we touched on before. And I think in every opportunity we have to really showcase this partnership, we are going to be appealing to the organizations that you just listed, and really, not desperately, but really trying to convey just how important it is to get kit out there.
If I could actually just jump in, I completely do agree with your point. I do think there's sort of the need to reuse if possible. But there's a conflicting narrative that we are sort of increasingly seeing, which is, as Elizabeth said, to just recycle the kit. So it's also about pushing that awareness out there of the benefit of reusing the kit rather than just, let's get the precious metals from it, let's try and turn a profit. So I do completely understand your point. It's about pushing a different narrative and what we know to work, and the people we work with, we know the power of this tech that is reused. So I completely agree. I think it's a narrative shift as well is the issue.
Absolutely.
Hi, I'm Kat Lai from Internet Matters. I'm Kat Lyon from Internet Matters. I was wondering if what are your hopes for the Digital Inclusion Action Plan, and in particular, do you have any concerns or worries about its implementation?
Now I need the mic. Fantastic. I mean, point one, we are very excited that it exists. Let's not forget it had been over 10 years since there had been a digital inclusion strategy within the UK. And I think what is outstanding actually from DCIT is the speed at which the new government has brought this forward, and the fact that it is very clear about what it is and what it isn't. It is a set of short-term actions that was wrapped up with a consultation and with an expert digital inclusion action committee that is being set up around this to actually develop it. So I think that's a really fundamentally great starting point. And we are really excited to be working as part of the delivery team on this with the pilot that Joel just outlined. I think for me, the hope and the concern, different sides of the same coin, is that we have to see those next steps. And we know, I do realise running a government is probably not as simple as we all make out, you know. It's very easy to sit there and say to somebody, the government should just do this. And I'm sure they go, yes, I'm sure we'd love to do lots of things. But we also know that priorities change very quickly. We know that there's so many announcements coming out from government. We know that a reshuffle could happen at any moment. And what we don't want to see is any of that momentum lost. I think the building blocks are there. Certainly we put in, I think it was 45 different recommendations, something like that, that we put in through the consultation process. Obviously, we would love to see all of these taken up. And obviously, everything that's set out in the National Delivery Plan that has a call to action for government, we would love government to be focusing on and picking up on. But more than anything, it's that momentum point, and it's not ticking it off and going, okay, well, we did something about it in 2025, we'll come back to it sometime. That would be my concern.
I think with the Digital Inclusion Action Plan, it's great, and of course, as our charity, we are great that we've been named in it and that we can do some great work with the pilot of the device distribution programme. I think one of my concerns and our concerns as a charity is in the groups that they listed as their sort of main point of call, it really did lack the diversity that it needed. We know that with digital inclusion, it is not a one-size-fits-all solution. That doesn't work. Even as simple as rural communities versus built-up communities, they need completely different things, completely different needs, but more so the differences in access between women and men, minority ethnic groups, those with English as a second language, those in non-permanent housing, the list goes on. And I think, you know, we can express our disappointment and hope that in the fuller digital inclusion plan that we do hope to see and that we'll continue to advocate for, that was alluded to in the Digital Inclusion Action Plan, we will see those groups really taken into account.
Who's next? Do we have any questions online?
I'd like to ask about Mission 4 and skills, and expanding essential digital and critical thinking skills across the whole of society. And I thought it was really interesting to read. You've put digital skills on a footing, the same footing as literacy and numeracy. I agree with that. So could you share some just sort of really aspirationally what that could look like? Are there any really good shining lights, examples of people who are making that really work? Are there some, is that happening on a local level? Or are there some countries that are really good at that? We've had various announcements about AI from the UAE. So yeah, if you could just sort of fill out that aspirational element for me. Sorry, that was a very long question. Just give me some time to think. There you go.
I think with the digital inclusion education plan is a good document from the European Union. It sets out the sort of blueprint for how to add digital skills into curriculum and promote lifelong learning, which I will say is our next panel. So I don't want to give too much away. I'll use up all of my points. But I'll pass to Leah, who's actually the author of Missions 3 and 4.
Yes, so I have actually been working on... Is it working? On a report, a higher education access report, because we were quite interested to see how school-aged children might face barriers into higher education due to a lack of digital skills, and obviously that might encompass media literacy, AI, all of those things. And surely, certainly from our perspective, digital access in itself, so a laptop would definitely facilitate as the first starting point to facilitate skills. Without the access, the skills can't follow. And what we found in our research was that parents of children understand how important a laptop is to send their children into higher education. So that would obviously be the first barrier. Without the laptop, there's not the necessary skills to develop them to then go on to higher education. Within higher education itself, there are also differences in skill ability. There are some more complex ones for potential degrees that might not necessarily apply to other ones, but that surely applies to AI in itself as well. And we know that a lot of students, I think it's to 80% of students use AI, so that could lead to a difference in skill building when it comes to using AI responsibly and safely, and also make the most of it. But when it comes to the media literacy element, obviously that needs to be taken into account as well. So I think it's definitely something that needs to be looked at in the future in terms of how we want to address that.
And I think sort of coming back to the heart of the starting point of your question there, yeah, if you can't read, if you can't add up, we all accept that these are major, major societal barriers, and these haven't been fixed. Literacy is still a major issue, numeracy is still a major issue, but we need that societal understanding that digital skills are just as important. Now, in Wales, actually, literacy, numeracy, and digital literacy sit together as being foundational skills. Why is that not the case across the UK when, as I say, we've got 6-year-olds who are being asked to upload their homework onto Microsoft Teams, but we're not saying that digital skills are really important? I mean, to me, that seems fairly evident, but it's no good it seeming fairly evident. We need that articulated. We need that set out.
Hi, so I'll be relaying some of the questions from online. One of the questions we've received is we would love to give all of our excluded children a laptop, but how could we fund this? And that's from Let's Get Digital in Manchester. I know we've touched on it briefly already, but perhaps you could elaborate.
Thank you. The great thing with this microphone back and forth is it gives me a second to think how I'm going to answer the question. It's fabulous. I so much wish I had a really, really simple answer to this because, delivery is a big part of what we do. We've helped around 5,000 families in the last couple of years get online, often for the first time. It's not a cheap endeavour. Buying laptops, they're not a low-cost item. They're actually a very high-cost item, especially if you're buying good quality kit that is going to last and really support a child in its development. I come back to the reuse programs that we're looking at. We really think this is fundamental. A big part of what we're looking at is individual device donations. So there are millions of laptops and tablets and smartphones sitting in drawers and cupboards up and down the country. If you are here today or watching online, there's probably a little tiny guilty part in the back of your brain going, oh yeah, I do have that old laptop actually that I probably could actually give away. I'm never going to turn it on again. The more we can get these out, yes, they are stopgaps, but actually they can get people onto a ladder of actually having a device, being able to access education, being able to apply for work, being able to access adult training, and everything else that comes with that. I think another part of what we are really keen to see covered within government initiatives is that where we do see grant funding from government coming through for poverty, commonly that doesn't include digital poverty. And we do want to see those funds being freed up to be used for that kind of activity. We do know that there is going to be an innovation fund coming out from DCIT. That's great, we really support that. But we're talking here more about activity maybe from DWP and other areas of government where you see these hardship grants coming out and how we can redirect that for digital use. Other than that, yes, it's a slog and we need much more support really across from grant funders, from corporate foundations, across the whole country to enable the purchase of these devices. I think we've got time for one more question, so either online or...
Gentleman over here.
Ooh, fantastic.
Hi there, good afternoon. Nick Robinson, I run a digital inclusion project in Essex. 8 years ago, we had a political party in opposition that are now in government that were talking in the terms of digital broadband becoming a public utility. This was language which was really well received in their manifesto. It was, to me, a sign of progress and moving forward. And 8 years on, your own research demonstrates 52% of families in the UK are struggling to pay broadband bills. Were we wasting our time 8 years ago with this language, with this expectation, with this pressure to see connectivity in the way we look at water, gas, electricity? There's no one here from government to speak and answer on that question, and you can't on their behalf. But is this not the language and the approach we should all be adopting?
It's a great question, and I mean, up there we had digital access has to be seen as a basic right. And absolutely, I can't imagine how we could not put broadband on a par with power, whether that's electricity or gas, water. It is a utility. It has to be accepted that it is. And there is a universal service obligation that sits around that, and you know that is what Ofcom would probably say if that question was posed to them. I think the difficulty that we are looking at here is, much like water or power, somebody has to pay for that somewhere. That has to be funded from somewhere. The question is, for the most vulnerable in society, how should that be funded? And we endlessly go around, and I remember talking about this last year, we endlessly go around a debate of, is it the individual, is it the state, or is it industry? Who should pay for this if the individual can't afford to? Should they just do without? This is where we are particularly keen to be looking at innovation in this. So we move away from just going, well, if you can't afford it, you can't have it. How can it's 2025, we have incredible technological progress across every element of our lives. I can't believe that there is no technological solution that can make disused broadband, you know, whether it's in an office or a football stadium or anywhere else, available to people living nearby who could just, you know, borrow some of that because it's sitting there out of use. And I think that's where there is a real opportunity. But if you leave here or you sign off from this webinar with one message, digital access has to be universal and it has to be perceived as a basic right in the UK. That is a great finishing point. We are now going to move across to our panel on skills. So I'm going to hand the mic over to Natalie, our Senior Policy Officer. Thanks so much to the rest of the team for having joined me up here. And we'll get the panellists up on the stage, Caddy, Alison and Lex.
Whilst we are getting comfortable, I'll briefly introduce the purpose for this panel. Obviously, digital skills is mission 4 in our National Delivery and Advocacy Plan. It is one of our core necessities that we have identified for closing the digital divide. Of course, we can provide an individual with devices, we can provide them with broadband, but without skills, how do people really thrive online? Because at the end of the day, it's not about accessing online, but it's about thriving online and staying safe whilst doing so. So I will pass over to Alison to introduce yourself, and then we'll go around.
Okay, hello. I'm Alison. I come from Policy Connect. We're a think tank, cross-party think tank based in Westminster, London. And I'm a research and strategy manager overlooking our education and skills team, which provides secretariat and research support for the all-party parliamentary group for skills, careers, and employment, as well as data analytics. Really excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
I'm Caddy. I'm the project lead for the Digital Skills Hub, which is based in Boscombe in Bournemouth. The aim of the project is to bridge the digital skills gap for residents and businesses in the Boscombe area. It's a government-funded initiative for BCP Council, and the project started about a year and a half ago. We've got 1 more year left, and we are working really hard to work across different public sector providers in the area and how we can actually achieve that goal. And thank you so much for having me part of the panel.
Hello, I'm Lex Lang. I'm the Deputy Head for Innovation and Partnerships at Caterham Prep School. I'm also work with the East Surrey Learning Partnership, which was set up at Caterham to support local schools, essentially stepping into this space where city learning centres were. I came up through state education, and city learning centres were a huge thing in terms of providing access and opportunities. And over the years, they've fallen away one by one until there's essentially a vacuum. So part of the reason for setting this up was to work with local schools to be able to provide the opportunities that weren't otherwise there. I'm also a national advisor for IAPS, which works with a network of schools across the country and the world, so advise on that, on opportunity, on access and development.
Thank you. So I think really now is a perfect time to talk about skills with the emergence of AI. We know it is ever growing. It's never not a good time really to talk about digital skills, but I think that more so it's becoming increasingly alarming, for me at least, that we are lacking on digital skills despite the growth that we have with emerging technologies. We know that the way policy moves, the way government moves, is never going to be up to speed with the way technology moves, and there's a first disconnect that we can identify. But with the growth of AI, things like deep fakes, it's becoming even more alarming that we can't discern what is real, what is not, and even more so for those who live in digital poverty. I think for me, it's not just about staying safe or being able to thrive, it's about having that confidence as well. For me, I have lived experience of digital poverty. When I first got my device and started working here, I didn't have the skills, and it was nerve-wracking for me to reach out to ask, because there's shame that comes with it, because it's expected for you to be able to be online and to thrive and to know what you're doing. It becomes then quite shameful to ask, and 58% of workers say that their employers have never offered any digital skills training, and that's really quite an alarming fact. But enough of me, I'll move on to the questions. So the first one is what lifelong digital skills should mean in practice, from foundational use to digital confidence, creativity and agency. So it's really about taking forward that basic use of digital skills into being able to thrive online. And I'll pass to Lex firstly.
Thank you. I think that's an absolutely critical point. The thing about that we kind of assume, there's a term digital natives that comes up an awful lot, like children and even young adults are just kind of, they're born to this. A lot of the people we work with are younger than iPads, but that doesn't, it means they know how to use a phone. It doesn't mean they are digitally confident. And there's a huge gap there, I think. And again, a shame. There can be a disadvantage that comes through, A, not having the access, and B, not having the understanding, the skills that go around that. So the World Economic Forum's Future of Jobs report comes up, and they update this every year. I don't know if you've seen it. It was to the earlier point about digital skills, that this is the first year, to my knowledge, that reading, writing and maths dropped out of the top 20 desirable skills. It's not to say they're not important. It is to say there are a huge number of other skills that can be facilitated by technology, and where that can be a huge barrier if it's not there. So I think the lifelong skills, I think, is that digital confidence, it's that creativity, it's the critical thinking, all those other bits. And they come into a huge number of areas. It's a lot of the work I do is working with schools and to upskill their staff, but also to kind of bring the children along. I think we need to give them the access, we need to give them the devices, but we need to give them the skills and the confidence to try it. And a lot of the time that involves addressing that shame, I think, because there's often a barrier whereby we don't give the adults the license to try things, to take risks, or they feel that they don't have it because they don't have the skill. And a big thing there is actually to embrace taking the risks, to embrace making mistakes, and to open that up, because that in itself is teaching a skill that is absolutely critical. But there are the actual digital poverty gaps that we need to get to. I think we're coming to those in later questions.
And of course, with digital skills training, if you are unable to know how to open up the internet, for example, how are you supposed to have then the confidence to use the latest AI, to know how to use it, or even to know that AI isn't completely neutral, it's biased to the people who are inputting the information? And I think that's probably a question to you, Alison. What does digital skills training look like in practice, especially with new emerging technologies?
Yeah, I will come to that question, but I actually wanted to answer the lifelong digital skills bit, because I think this is a little bit more important right now. I think the lifelong piece comes from iteration. Anybody can be digitally excluded at one part in their lives, and then be included, and then return back to exclusion. And I think that is a really good call for policy is never going to keep up with the change of technological innovation. And what we need is modular and agile training and skill systems that kind of support people to reskill and upskill whenever they need it for their careers, or to have careers that are professionally but also personally fulfilling for them. And I was talking to Emma from Digital Unite earlier, and we were talking about emerging technologies and how that's changing our very definition of literacy. But I like to think that AI literacy and this whole conversation about emerging tech is just digital inclusion repackaged within these new fancy terms. I think that the gap between who is digitally literate and those who are excluded are widening. So it's key for us to bridge that gap and understand that the skills are becoming stratified further and further, and that it's now a much more complex issue to look at delivering digital skills. Everybody is on a different part of the journey, and it depends on what work they do, what sector they're in, what region they live in, what access they have to for products. I think all of those points need to be not fragmented, but thought of holistically in order to deliver on important skills training.
Definitely. If you have anything to add?
Yeah, thank you for actually bringing up the whole sort of iterative and agile model. That is something that we actually do within the Digital Skills Hub. So we've built the whole structure and delivery for it to be iterative and to be actually built on increments. So after every single course that we deliver, we actually look back and we have a discussion, okay, what is actually happening new in the industry? What has emerged? What is new? And we actually tailor. I know it's a lot of energy and I know it takes a lot, and we are privileged to be able to do that, but I think it works really well. We actually tailor each session and everything that we deliver according to what's happening in the industry that month. So since we've actually started the project, we haven't actually planned all the way through, 1 year, 2 years in advance, of course, just like key milestones, but for every single course, every single delivery that comes out of the hub for residents and for businesses are iterative. And we actually work, answering the question about what does lifelong mean? And from my experience, working with residents and businesses, especially small businesses, around digital inclusion, is actually the first question should be, what are the motivations behind the individual that is coming for that support? And then giving that support, because digital inclusion looks different for different people. For example, we find someone could actually, again, use a laptop, but actually they don't have the digital capability to use a mobile phone or ChatGPT within their phone. Does that make them digitally included or not? And that question, that question can be answered depending on the context of, okay, what is the motivation behind learning? So one thing that we have done is that every single individual that comes and seeks support from us, whether as residents or a business, we actually ask them that question. Why do you want to do this course? What is it you want to get out of it? And we might find people who are maybe doing a beginner's course or intermediate. We just launched Intermediate Plus. They might find actually they are all in the same level. They might not operate a computer, but they all have different motivations. Then that goes back to the tutor. Then the tutor has a list and goes, Sam needs this, Tom needs this, and then they can use this as a motivation during the session to say, oh, you can use this skill for this. And they're like, oh, okay, I'm motivated now, right? So that's one thing. And then the second thing is building capability. So lifelong means, for me, it's not, okay, so after this project finishes, what happens next? And I don't see it as a it's not a responsibility just for one organization. I see it as a responsibility as a cross-sector. So responsibility starts from home, responsibility starts in schools, responsibility starts in government, responsibility starts with the councils, in NHS, within any sort of public sector organization. So really working together really works. I know, just adding one more point to this, is that one thing that we've also have done to support this idea is that we have something called Community Connect Tuesday. So we've actually partnered with other with other public sector organizations in the area, for example, the Job Centre, Citizens Advice, National Career Service, Community Action Network, which they support, they work with different charities and how they can support local residents integrating into volunteering. So basically what we've done is actually got these organizations to come into the hub once a week and provided a one-stop shop. And because we're based in the high street, we have actually incorporated this we made it accessible for residents to come and use and get digital skills support as an everyday task. They can finish their shopping and then they can come into the hub. So rather than just making it accessible, not just being there, but also being visible. I think that's really, really critical, especially now with digital skills. It's predicted to be the largest, correct me if I'm wrong, the largest gap by 2030. Yeah. So I think everyone should do their part.
No, definitely.
Oh, thank you.
No worries. And actually, I think that's a really interesting and great point on speaking to the people who are going to receive the benefit of the digital skills training and ask them what they want out of it. Because it's easy from a very privileged perspective where I might now know how to use digital platforms, okay, so it's fine for me to deliver what I believe people may need. I may believe that people need to learn how to use AI, for example, but actually that might not necessarily be true. And I think that brings me on to my second question, which is, how do we ensure that digital skills training is purposeful and suited for the individual rather than just training on the new technologies that are out there and trying to train people on anything and everything rather than what they really need to thrive? Who would like to take that one first?
Sorry, I've got loads of notes. I was thinking about this on the way here. I parachuted in relatively late. There's a change in the platform. Originally, Gavin from First Field was going to be here, and he actually is a case study in the AI report. On the way up, I was talking to an AI, as you do, now bouncing ideas back and forth. And being a primary school teacher, I got to thinking about vowels. So I ended up thinking for this, exactly this, that there's a kind of A-I-O-U to this. By the time I hit 3 of them, I worked out you could flesh out the rest. But I think to cover all of those areas, what it comes down to is access. So first, there's that you need to have places that people can go to, be that school, be that library, be that we're building an innovation hub for the community to access, that kind of thing. That there need to be places that people can go to, or home. Home can be one of those, but it needs to be the ability to get to things. You need equipment, so you need to have laptops, you need to have tablets, mobile phones, something, again, that allows you to access these things in whatever situation you happen to find yourself in. You need the infrastructure. So that's back to internet and broadband, Wi-Fi, all those bits, that getting that into places that people can access is critical, because otherwise you're excluded. An early thing we learned quite in doing our work with the East Surrey Learning Partnership was that we were able to facilitate, we're working with some schools to give them what they needed and to provide licenses and AI access and things like that, which was great, but they didn't have devices, so we were able to provide some devices. And then in at least one case, they said, that's great, but we don't have reliable Wi-Fi. And that's a really big barrier, and it's one that we can't, it's not within our capacity to change that, because it is a rolling program. But that is where external providers can come in, and we can work together cross-sector to make that happen, because it unglues all the different things. Next up, we've got opportunity. And opportunity is partly, again, it's intangibles. It's things like licenses, because that's another thing that we found. We started off looking at equipment and skills and training. That's great, but a lot of things are behind paywalls. Lots of things have ongoing licensing. And there we've been very fortunate. We work with in our specific context, that we're able to work with our fundraisers, and we have support that people donate to that. But it means that initially it started as buying and providing equipment and providing spaces. But actually a lot of that has been increasingly is about providing access to things. Are we able to provide Century tech for people to use online learning platforms, or an AI platform for children that children can use? So we've got a RileyBot AI platform that children can use, but that's not a thing that many places can pay for. And so that is another digital divide. But also it's internal, it's being allowed. So the opportunity is also being allowed to use these things, being allowed to try things out, and feeling like you're allowed. Because a lot of time I think people think it goes without saying, but it needs to go with saying. And that's really, really important. And the last thing around it is upskilling. So that we need to make sure that there are people who are A, confident delivering and using these things, but also B, open about being learners. And a big thing we've had to do with teachers right across all the schools we work with and nationally is to say, you don't need to be the expert in everything, you just need to get out of the way of the learning. And that it's okay to say, I don't know how to do that, but how could we find out? Because that's really modeling the core of what we want. And for things like AI, for things like all that, so many of the times we panic, or people worry about not knowing where to start. And often, increasingly and uniquely, now the first place to start is to turn to something and say, I don't know how to use you, can you tell me? Because it's often that simple. But people worry, and I think, and so weirdly, a hugely powerful piece of training is just to say to people, ask questions and let people ask questions, and then train within that. That was a very long answer, I'm so sorry.
No, it was great, it was great. Alison, I will pass to you because I'm really interested in knowing how we have digital skills that are purposeful with AI in the context of AI.
Yeah, I mean, I guess this was so comprehensive and overarching that I think I'm going to focus on a very specific thing, which is actually having some sort of conversations with our tech developers who are making these tools and products and stating that there needs to be non-functional requirements. So I'm talking about cybersecurity, accessibility, that are so embedded into the product they make that will not be procured if it doesn't work for the very people it's supposed to serve. And I'm specifically thinking about some cases where I've spoken to teachers across schools and colleges who, you know, the procurement of ed tech tools are happening, oftentimes AI supported, are happening out of their control. And the school or college spends millions on these ed tech tools only to find out in its implementation phase that it's not interoperable with the other kind of technology that they have going on in their schools, or maybe it's actually not accessible to the end user in terms of like the back-end development. So maybe it looks great and nice for the student, but for the teacher, it's really hard to navigate and super complex. That means it's not usable. And a lot of these conversations happen way too late. We need to be talking and setting the expectation out there for these tech developers to make something explainable and understandable for the mass public. And I think that's a huge piece of how do we encourage purposeful participation.
Yeah.
Amazing.
I completely agree with your point about actually embedding and building digital inclusion and accessibility within the design than for it to be considered as an afterthought. Mm-hmm. You know, again, we see this even like with our tutor, you know, it's sometimes, I completely agree, you know, sometimes the product is not designed, is only designed for one user in mind. And I think with audit advances, I think they have the capability to think about different users for that product. But going back to your question, I will just quickly just touch on the AI piece and what we do at the Hub. So we've actually started a new workshop course called AI for Everyday Life. And this, again, this was not actually even a course that we were thinking about a year and a half ago, but again, just based on research. And then people are just curious to find out what actually is AI. So this course is designed for residents, for individuals who just want to, who are sort of worried, what is AI and how can I get use out of it? I think there's a lot of information on what is AI, and I think a lot of people really over complicated, especially like on, you know, if I search up what is AI and go on YouTube, a lot of it is just really complex, you know, descriptions. So for us is based on the research we've done with our users, is that actually switching the mindset and the narrative that is just a tool. Obviously, you need to be safe with it and everything like that, but it's just a tool. And then, you know what? Enough with actually knowing what it is, but how can you jump on it and be confident, and how can it help you with your everyday life? So this course has actually been really successful. That we have actually got like a waiting list, and these individuals were actually worried only a couple months ago about AI, and now just for a conversation, actually, they're like, "Oh wow!" After 1 hour. Oh, I can do this with ChatGPT. Oh my God, I didn't need to be a genius. Like, no, it's just a tool. So obviously for us, we promote being safe and being, you know, resilient and actually have discernment of what is right and wrong. That's a big key part. And then we've also introduced, well, this is actually for the last 6 months, in collaboration, we have a Dr. Phil that comes and supports us at the Hub from Bournemouth University. And he actually delivers something called Tech Talks. So it's actually bringing public lectures bringing his lectures, but actually changing the delivery to be appropriate for the public. And then because it's in the high street, which is great, it's in the evenings, and then it's actually bringing breaking down complex topics into something very simple. So once a month we have an evening, and then members of the public come in, and then we speak about what's happening with AI, but we change the actual title of it. So, for example, it could be, is my child safe online? That could be the title to get people in. And then we introduce that, oh yeah, this is going to be AI, because sometimes when people hear AI, they think, oh, it's not going to include me. You know, I'm not part of it. But actually, they don't realize it's actually really embedded in our everyday life without actually realizing, especially in the next 5 years. Yeah. So that's my answer to the question.
No, that's great. Thank you. I think I'm not only trying to focus on AI. I know that there are digital skills beyond AI that we need to know from the most basic level. But I think we can't ignore how relevant it is and how it's growing continuously. And I think my next question really that I'm really keen to hear your perspectives on is how we stay safe and promote critical thinking. We are obviously promoting these technologies and giving people the digital skills needed, but how can we ensure that we are safe and responsible with our AI uses? For me, a big issue is with deep fakes and using AI in quite a malicious fashion. How do we promote critical thinking and safe use of digital skills, really looking at AI? Whoever wants to jump in?
Thank you. This really is hugely important. I think we launched, again, it's probably about a year and a half ago, we had to, as part of this, developed our AI policy and developed a sequence of lessons, right down again to the primary school age because it matters so much. And we called it, How Can AI Help Us? But it was, we ended up boiling down our whole policy. It started off being pages and pages long. And it tried to cover every facet of what might come up. And ultimately, the tools were evolving so quickly that by the time we'd finished drafting it, it was laughably simple, and everything was out of date. So we ended up boiling it down really to 3 key points, which was, for us, it was know how it works, be honest when you're using it, and be accountable for what you create. You can't blame the AI. But actually, with all of these things that come up so often, is when we look at deepfakes, when we look at plagiarism, when we look at all sorts of the safety around it, or intellectual laziness, or all the other things that we worry about, I think, as well as the strengths, is that it's just forcing issues that have always been there. Like when we all went to school, we were always told that you need to check your sources, you need to look at alternatives, you need to look things up, you need to verify, and we all nodded and then opened the one book, because you got the one book and you haven't got time for that nonsense. And even when the internet came along and there was all the outcry and Wikipedia came along and there was all this sort of doubt and worry, very quickly we left it all behind because you didn't really need to think about it for too long. It's absolutely critical now in a way that it hasn't been before, but not because it's new. It's just because it's easier and it's more present. I don't know if any of you saw the newest Google video generator. So even a couple of months ago, and we had to update our schemes of work all over again, because even a year or two ago, we said, well, look, you can generate a second or two of video now. It's rubbish, but you can. And then a couple of months ago, Sora came out, and you could generate a few seconds of video at a time, and it looked pretty good, but sometimes the legs look a bit odd. And then the newest Google one that they started publicly releasing a week ago, and everyone can use now with the right licenses, can do the sound, it can do all of it. So I watched one with a car show, and there were people at a car show talking about electric cars, and you have a dozen or so people being interviewed, and every single part of it, I challenged children and staff, can you tell me which bits of this aren't real? And none of it's real, at all, none of it, not any part. And you can't tell, at all. Actually, there's a bit where there's a guy wearing sort of Hell's Angels jacket, and when you look at the text on the patches, it is real words, but none of the words really mean anything. That's it. And the badges on the cars aren't real. But they could be. They could just be cars I haven't heard of. And at that point, we can have an existential crisis and go into a kind of... I guess the two paths we see diverging, the extremes, are a kind of hyper-credulity, where we worry that people will believe everything they see. We've grown up through pictures or it didn't happen. Now it's pictures and it didn't happen. That's a real worry. But the other end of the flip side of that is a kind of digital nihilism where we just doubt everything and everything is a lie. And our responsibility is to make sure that we help people to build up the skills to interrogate the things they see around them, to use these incredible tools we have, but also to think about how can you fact check? How can you make sure something's real? How can you use these tools to support you to do so much more than you could otherwise, but in a way that doesn't undermine your learning, doesn't undermine the skills that you essentially need to drive, because there is an opportunity here. The World Economic Forum, again, their report, they talked about an importance gap as well as a skills gap, that we put our emphasis on the wrong things. And there are so many incredibly important skills that we should be working on, the critical thinking, the problem solving, all those bits, and a lot of that is just about talking. And how do you know, and why is that important, and why is that better, or why is that worse? Asking why and how do you know is critical. Pass over.
Thanks for that. Just to add to your points, for us is two things really. One is which we embed actually within our courses. We really touch up on that, is knowing where did the source came from. So let's say if they saw a video online, is it different if they saw the video on TikTok or on social media, and then there's a difference if they saw it, for example, on the BCP video. It's like you, just for them to have the ability to assess whether this particular piece of content, which source has it come from, and then for them to have the confidence to make that decision. And then the second thing is not really trusting it. I know you said about being honest with putting your information, but for example, not putting their personal information.
Absolutely.
That's one thing. Just not putting the actual, maybe their names or their pictures and stuff like that. Because at the moment, I know there's a lot of sort of legal policy making right now. How is AI or ChatGPT or how is it being monitored? And there's, different countries have different rules, and it's still in the process. But at the moment, because we don't have that information, it's just best to just keep it. It's like knowing what you're using the AI for, and also trusting the information that comes out, because it is just a lot of information. Of course, it's really great, but at the same time, it's not. You can't just take this AI's word for it. Sometimes you have to actually go back and say, can you please source where did this information has come from?
Definitely.
I guess these are the 2 points you mentioned are sort of talking about how to deliver the AI literacy on a bottom-up basis. And I think that in terms of like the overarching and organizational thing, like delivery of this, I think all teachers, educators, training people should be equipped with this knowledge. And to do that takes a lot more than, it takes a little bit more pressure and policy action. For example, mandating that all, like the update of occupational standards for teachers so that they understand how AI is being utilized. They don't need to be experts, but they do need to recognize that they are immensely large databases and not actual human sentient beings, for example. When it's talking to a student and generating answers for their homework, maybe your assessment is not fit for purpose, and rethinking those things. I think there needs to be an expectation, because the current approach right now is that if you are able to upskill yourself, which we know teachers do not have the capacity to do so, nor the time, nor the resources oftentimes. It's based on individual will rather than an expectation across the sector. So that would be my addition to the fantastic points made before.
Thank you. The last question from me for our panel before I throw over to yourselves is, what is needed to create a coherent national and local ecosystem for digital skills that reflects different life stages, different learning preferences, and barriers to access?
I think on a smaller scale, what we've seen that has really worked for us, we've had over 10,000 users come and use our hub over the last less than 2 years. But the reason for our success is because of partnerships. And it's really critical that it's not one person's responsibility. It's definitely it needs to be a cross collaborative approach across all industries, and I think everyone's responsible. And also and I think for it to be lifelong, there needs to be capacity and capacity built within sort of public-facing roles. And I think that's the issue. Is also the time and the capacity to do that. But I think that's when you actually can have more of an effect. We might have an effect on Boscombe, but what happens with the other towns? How are they doing that? How can they really push for? And also, for example, let's say with NHS, again, this adding more pressure. But if, then it needs to be built in with public-facing roles. Let's say people that work within the job centre or citizens' advice who are in touch, or people or jobs that are in a public-facing role, how can they support the user? So it's definitely a collaboration.
Yeah.
I'd absolutely echo that. Yeah, I think Elizabeth said earlier, the sort of local action drives national change, and it's really important that we get started. I think there's I'm going to talk later on to a group of early career teachers for exactly this, but sort of getting started, and that actually is interesting to see that new things like the AI stuff is now part of teacher training, but which it should be, and I think, but it's really important with all of this that a theme I'm going to talk about is that you need to have your eyes on the horizon and your feet on the ground, but really that we can stand there worrying about how to get started and do nothing, and that we need to get started. We need to arrange things in our area, but it's bigger than us, so that's where it's critical for groups to work together. So we've got our East Surrey Learning Partnership, and we work with our local primary schools, and we can collaborate with each other, but that comes with buying power and negotiating power. It comes with the opportunity to work together across sectors and bring things in so we can support each other. And then you can expand that out further. And that sort of we can all do our own things in our own bubble. And I think it's critical that we do. But then that can feed into national policy. It can feed into ideas that inspire other groups, the case studies, the reports that the DPA have released, all those things that feed into big changes, you need those case studies. So I think the best thing we can all do is to get started and then push on those things about, again, those expectations about constantly reskilling and upskilling and not being the barrier. Again, I think if we can open things up to people, build internal cultures that say ideas are ideas, like they can come from anyone, and if we're open to that, we give people the agency to come up with suggestions for could we try this or this might work, then it means that we can suddenly magnify what we can do within our own little bubbles, and then we can sort of expand that out to wider groups and work together. We don't need to keep reinventing the wheel, but we need to have a wheel, and everyone needs to be doing what they can in their sector and then pulling them together when they can.
Super. I'll keep mine quite brief. I think the important thing is about maintaining momentum. So just echoing what Elizabeth said earlier in the panel. But I think I'll give an example of a policy design that was kind of abandoned without reason. So the local digital skills partnerships were evaluated to be extremely successful in certain regions and not so successful in other regions. We have evaluation reports of those, the why it worked in certain regions, but we don't know why it didn't work in others. And before any organization was able to kind of look at why, the entire program was absorbed into the combined authorities and has not seen daylight since. And I think this is something that I'm hopeful that the Digital Inclusion Action Plan will correct in its implementation. And as it fully fleshes out over the next year, I hope the priorities continue the great kind of ambitions that were set out in the plan, but also deliver on some really promising skills delivery that has been laid out and is aligned with the other policy announcements that we've seen this past term. So that would be my addition. Thank you.
Amazing. We will now open up to any questions that anyone may have. Perfect. Jennifer, do you mind? I could get up, but I honestly won't chance my heels on those steps. So, thank you.
Fantastic. I've got a question from Pauline, who works at Digital NNS, and she asks, what are some of the tangible steps that industry can take to address digital poverty? And within this concept of this panel, of course, from the skills perspective.
think the important thing is that employers must invest in workforce training and upskilling where possible, and that shouldn't just be left to the hands of the apprenticeship levy or funding mechanisms publicly provided. A lot of companies do have the resources to ensure that there is continuous professional development for their workers, but there just isn't enough incentive or pressure to do that. So for example, in a previous report that Policy Connect, my think tank, published, we talked about the concept of the right to retrain. So having a couple of days in the year kind of sectioned off for retraining purposes. Obviously that we've had conversations with government about the achievability of such an idea, but something that encourages employers especially to invest in their own people is something that we're especially keen on supporting. I think another thing is many jobs are at risk of displacement due to technological innovation with no tangible steps on how to protect those people who are at risk. So there needs to be an ongoing conversations with employers about their role in supporting the workforce.
Anyone else want to jump in?
Just one point, just to echo what you said, is just looking at the labour market information and the going back to for employers, the biggest skills gaps are now technology related, especially when it comes to like user design, engineering, in terms of actually many sort of like intricate tech roles. This shows that there is a need for building capability within the organisation and supporting individuals to actually achieve those roles. So it is a responsibility, of course, for the individual and for the employer. I think it goes both ways.
I'd echo the same thing again. I think sort of that word ongoing, I think, is really important. That in terms of learning, so the lifelong learning is one of those things that comes up again and again in desirable traits. And obviously that's a thing within schools. That kind of seems to go without saying, but again, it doesn't always. That we're not just teaching stuff, you're teaching learning, but that needs to keep going all the way through, I think, within every organisation. And again, sort of the opportunity for continued learning, but also the expectation that you're not allowed to just say, sort of hit your rut and go, this is where I am, because the rut's changing. It's continuing to evolve. And it needs to. But I think the same goes when organisations work in partnerships, that partnerships need to be sustained as much as they can. I think there's an amazing, huge number of companies do incredible work around CSR stuff, working with different organisations, going off and doing volunteering days and things like that. But often it is doing a thing and leaving. And so many things require ongoing support, ongoing development. And that's often not as much fun. It doesn't grab a headline in the same way. You can't take nice pictures of ongoing support in the same way as you can if you go in and you build a garden. Building a garden is amazing and important, but also those ongoing bits of, especially for digital poverty and things like that. And having an awareness, sort of building that within company cultures as well. Awareness of digital poverty, being aware of people's situations, which is digital and everything else. The invisible things that people are dealing with. And I think we're getting better at it, but it's critical to maintain that and make it, again, an expectation at management, but at every role, that's on people's minds.
Definitely. Any other questions? Charlotte.
Hi, thank you. I'm Charlotte from In-Kind Direct, and I feel incredibly lazy for not just walking up to the table to get the microphone. I'm really interested in listening to what you're saying, and it all resonates. I was at a similar event last week, actually, around period equity, which sounds completely unrelated, but it actually is completely related. And one of the kind of sad truisms we were looking at is the human right issue, the reducing poverty issue, all of those issues for everyone in this room are enough reason to do something. But as hard as we're all trying, there isn't enough happening right now. I think we've all acknowledged that. And the solution often comes down to, well, we need more investment, we need more money, which we know is a really difficult conversation to have. So it feels like there is a different business case that needs to be made. And so I guess what I'm wondering on the skills front is kind of almost if we're going to be the solution to a problem, what are the biggest challenges or pushbacks anyone on the panel has had to why this isn't happening and why we aren't doing more? Because I think if we can position ourselves as the solution to a problem rather than just asking for money, which we all know is probably going to be part of the solution, maybe in this room there's the heads that can go, okay, well actually we can solve that problem by something a bit different and be a stronger business case, because, as I say, the human rights issue is absolutely valid, but not perhaps getting the cut through that we all want it to right now.
I will just jump in here while we wait for the mic. I think one of the things that we risk is getting caught up in discussing this, having these big conversations, and they're great because we get to hear from experts in the fields and we get to put forward a plan, but we miss just the first step, which is action. Like you said, there's not a step really which is too small. There is a role for everybody in this room, even if you don't directly see it, even for the individual, speaking to people, having that communication about their digital skills, people in your family or your friends who might not be as digitally literate as you are. There are conversations to be had. There is action to be taken. And I think we really do get caught up in the best practice and the best plan to go forward when really action in just the smallest steps is really what's needed, and I'm sure that one fits with you.
Absolutely that, yeah, and it's back to the sort of the eyes on the horizon, feet on the ground thing. But I think we will often get to your point. It's natural to go into why we can't do anything because we're waiting for somebody to organise it or do it properly, and maybe it's money or maybe it's something else. And I think sort of working that question back into, well, what can you do, and not you, everyone, but what can you individually do? And we can all do something. And I think then it scales up. What do we want? We often start with what we can't do or what the problems are, and obviously those are critical to address, and that's why we're here, is that there are huge problems that need addressing. But there are always things that we can do right now. And if we start with the what can you do, and you're walking in towards the horizon that you've identified, then all of that helps. And it helps to overcome the inertia that there often is, that nobody does anything because everyone's waiting for somebody else to do it or somebody else to organise it. So everyone just sits there complaining that nothing's happening. And if someone starts walking, then people will tend to join them in walking. And then we can organise it properly as we go. There's the whole thing about building the aeroplane as you fly. It's not a good way to build a plane, but it's better than sitting there bemoaning the fact that you haven't got a plane.
Yeah.
So aside from like budget, which you've mentioned, obviously there's, I think all initiatives always ask for, we need more budget, and I think that is probably the most important thing, because if there is budget, I think that there wouldn't be like many excuses for local authorities or organisations to actually take action. But aside from that, I think the challenge that we faced, aside from budget and for it to continue and building momentum, is actually there's a blurred line of defining digital inclusion and exclusion. Just going back, I think it means different things to different people. So I know there's the essential digital framework, which was done by Lloyd's a couple of years, I think about 6 years ago, which has not been updated yet. But I think defining what it means, so when you can go into the conversations, people will know that it is definitely a right and not a luxury, just like Elizabeth mentioned. But it goes back to being clear. This is what's needed. This is what it means for you to be digitally included in this world right now. And then the challenge with that is that it changes every month. So that is the biggest challenge, is to keep up with the trends.
Just to respond specifically about what the challenge is in terms of, I think, yes, investment is a problem. The fiscal restraint is a problem. But another problem is and I don't know if this is the right word for it, but it's something that I like to think of as counter policies. It's when policies are announced in tandem or in parallel that oppose each other in delivery in some ways. For example, the government's overarching mission to have the lifelong learning entitlement, shows this commitment to lifelong learning. But then recently we've heard of the adult skills budget being slashed by 6%. And another one is for the skills piece, right? We want to keep track and have metrics-driven kind of a way of measuring skills and the capabilities of people. We want that to be in one place. But then there's this data protection policy within the departments that prohibits schools from talking to councils, councils talking to colleges, colleges talking to each other, which means it's really difficult to identify problems sometimes. So I think this calls for, I guess, more coordination between the departments to ensure that policies aren't opposing each other when they're delivered. But also, we want to move away from fragmentation and have, I don't think a top-down approach always works. We've heard so many cases today, calling for champions and people on the ground who are actually working with individuals who need that help. But the governance structure of which we all sit in is making that really challenging sometimes. And I think that needs addressing.
We have time, I believe, for one more question.
So there have been a couple of questions online. I'm going to try and link them all together. It's going to be a wonderful synergy because we've had a couple of people mentioning about the Adult Skills Fund being slashed by 6%, and Luke from the Workers' Educational Association has also asked about how groups like that can access more secure funding. But this also links into a question from Hannah, which is what work is being undertaken to understand the quantifiable economic benefits of digital inclusion, which I think, if that comes back round, would answer the question around funding.
Thank you.
Thanks. I am an education researcher, so particularly on this, I don't have statistics to link, but I just wanted to say one thing. There's a lot of evidence on what works to increase digital participation. It's just all over the place, and it's very region-specific. It needs to be collected in one place. The government mentions this in the Digital Action Inclusion Plan, that we need a kind of evidence hub or base for what works. And I'm just worried that it's going to be a duplication of all the efforts that have been put towards trying to increase digital participation in rural regions or of specific vulnerable groups. I just want to make sure that if we do a data collection exercise, let it not be a kind of redundant one, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. So there was 3 different questions into one. One is the 6% decrease in skills education, which was released yesterday, I believe.
Yes, a decrease.
Yeah, decrease, which negatively impacts what kind of contradicts the digital inclusion DSIT paper, which came out in February, right? I think it definitely contradicts. But to answer that question is, in the same report on yesterday, there are estimated, please correct me if I'm wrong, 330,000 estimated tech jobs that are going to be emerging in the next couple of years. So therefore, this already shows that there is a massive need, that we definitely need to combat this, and it needs to be all right. So decrease in budget is going to just actually negatively impact not just the service users, but the providers that are actually wanting to continue the work and initiative they have already started. So how maybe it's not really answering a question, maybe I'm answering a question with a question, but maybe someone here has an answer. 5 minutes ago. But so my question, maybe you actually have an answer, is how could we actually how could we continue the momentum and the enthusiasm to keep pushing when there's I feel like every single year there's a decrease in support?
It's a really difficult one, because we wait for a sort of joint-up approach or that leading voice from government. But I mean, how can we really expect that when our own government contradicts itself, as you said? So I think really with this, it is about action, and I think that action snowballs into something bigger. With things like this, we have people like-minded in the room, and we're able to get that ball rolling. But like you said, going back, these conversations when we're waiting for a leading voice lead to inaction. So we need to start pushing, whether however small that is, and with the hopes that it'll snowball into something bigger.
And I think a lot of it is also foundational. So when we're looking at cuts at the top, obviously that makes a big difference. One thing that can mitigate that significantly is building up those lifelong learning skills, because if we're reinforcing that from day one, that makes a huge difference. When we did a piece of research last year about children using AI, we got this RileyBot platform that was an appropriate platform for children to use. But I was immediately asked, well, what research is there on this? And there wasn't any, because it was kind of chicken and egg. What we looked at in looking at impact is it's not about looking at how does a specific tool change results or something like that, because there are so many different factors. But what we studied was how it changed children's attitudes to their learning, and that they felt much more independent, weirdly, when we worry about loss of agency. They felt more independent, they felt more in control of their learning, they felt more engaged with what they were doing, because they didn't need to wait for somebody else to tell them how to do it. And I think if we can build those things through, if we build that sort of agency in learning, and people thinking of themselves as lifelong learners who can reskill, because the job sectors are constantly changing, because the days when you can learn a trade and then that trade is going to be the same trade in 20 years or even 5 years are receding very quickly. And you need to be able to, learning is the key skill. It's so vitally important. When we teach coding at my school, it's not so that the students will become expert coders, because anything that we're going to teach them in terms of specific skills isn't going to apply. Those things will keep changing, they will keep evolving, but actually what we're teaching and it's back to the importance gap, is saying that the point is actually the thinking, the point is actually the critical thinking and the problem solving and all those bits. And all of this is very easy to say, but then it comes back to opportunity. So it comes back to the digital poverty side, that we need to be equipping everybody with the skills to think of themselves as lifelong learners, but we also need to give them the opportunity. We need to give them the tools they need, put it in their hand. It's great to say to people, if you can use AI safely, if you can use it well, if you understand how it works and use it well, it will power you to be individually tutored on anything you want to learn and anything you want to do. That's wonderful if you've got access. If you've got access to the models, if you've got access to the devices, if you've got the AEIOU, the access to the equipment, the infrastructure, the opportunity, and that kind of upskilling mindset.
Definitely. I will now invite you all to have a brief summary sentence. Let's try and keep it short. I saw the 2-minute sign, so I'm slightly nervous. Who would like to start with the summary?
I will, just so that I don't run out of any ideas in case anybody grabs mine. But I think I'll end with digital inclusion is iterative.
Love that.
I would say digital skills is not a luxury. It's definitely a right.
I'll say know where you're aiming for and then start walking.
Exactly. I think that it really is a privilege not to know about digital inclusion. But we can't live in that way anymore. We have to push forward. Even the smallest bit of action is better than nothing. And I really urge everyone in the room and watching and our community to do something, a tiny action, even if it's reflecting on your own privilege or the people in your own life, even to the industries that you represent. There is something for everyone to do. So thank you to our panellists. And we have a 20-minute short break. I heard there's a nice view if you want to go up the steep steps I don't know if I want to. So do go and enjoy yourself, stretch your legs. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you
so much. Thank you.
Thank you. It was good to meet both of you.
Yeah.
I don't know why we all went. Thank you. Thank you.
kind of just wanted to call and get it over with. Things haven't really been working out as well between us, and I think it's time for both of us to kind of just move forward. I care about you a lot, but I think that this is the best decision for me.
everyone, we're going to get started again. So do grab your seats. Hurried shuffles back to the chairs. There will be more opportunity for networking later on, so this isn't your only moment. Just because it's actually always really interesting to know, where are you sitting? And a few people have said that this is actually a really beautiful and unusual space. I'm really happy that Will, who is the manager of the Square Tower, has said that he's just going to give us a couple of minutes, the very short potted history of where it is we are today.
Oh, I do. Okay. Hello. There you go. Fantastic. I thought I'd start off by using AI to see if I could find out anything about the tower. So one of the secrets about the Square Tower is that there's a hidden burial tomb underneath. And this is for Sir Richard Leicester. His remains were secretly moved there in the 17th century. So there we go. I found something out new. But the Square Tower was built in 1494 by Henry VII. It's been used for many, many things over the years, and it's just been adapted for what it's been needed for. It has been a gunpowder store. Most of the residents at the time weren't fans of that because they thought it would blow up the city. So that gunpowder got moved over to Gosport in the Explosion Museum. And then it was used for a meat store. So if you've been to the upstairs ceremony room, there are hooks on the wall, and that's where the meat was stored. And then, on the roof, there was a semaphore tower. So a couple more stories up, more of a wooden structure. And that signalled all the way through to London during the war until that got taken over when digital things came about. 1960s, Portsmouth City Council acquired it from the MOD. And then in 1969, it was given the Grade 1 listing. Luckily now, we get to use it for weddings, birthday parties, and yourselves today. Has anyone got any questions or anything I can help with? I've probably skipped through a lot of history, but it's all near the toilets if you haven't already seen those dates. But after you. Very good question, and I'm sure Google would be able to help with that. But yeah, as you said, they are coats of arms, and they all mean something different. But I don't have that answer, unfortunately. Any other questions? Perfect. Thank you very much.
Wonderful. Thank you, Will. I found that definitely interesting, and I had forgotten the link between, of course, yes, a semaphore tower, the original form of communication for ships coming and going about all sorts of different topics. And, of course, what are we still doing here? We're still talking about communication. So there is, amazingly, that direct link. I'm very delighted now to welcome up Catherine Hale, who is the Group Social Impact Manager at Currys PLC. I'm sure many of you will know that Currys were absolutely instrumental in the formation of the Digital Poverty Alliance. When it came into being during the pandemic, Currys were one of the 3 founding partners. And of course, last year, we went from having been a charity called the Learning Foundation to the Digital Poverty Alliance being our entire focus, our entire being. So Catherine has been on this journey with us for quite some time, including something that's very close to my heart because I feel like it was my baby, getting Tech for Families going, which is an incredible scheme that allows customers within Currys stores to donate 25p or 50p at the point of sale. And then we take all of these donations and use them to purchase laptops. And this has helped over 2,000 families get online since it was launched. So, Catherine, please join me. So we're going to have a bit of a chat, which hopefully you will all enjoy. If you do have any questions, we will, again, have a bit of an opportunity to hear from you guys and from online, so do keep those questions coming in. But I guess to kick us off, Catherine, 1 in 7 adults, 1 in 5 kids in the UK are living in digital poverty right now, today, while we're here. This is what's happening. How are Currys helping your teams to understand the scale and the urgency of this issue and why it matters in everyday life?
Yeah, so thanks for having me here. You gave a great introduction, and we talked about COVID and how that's how we started kind of the DPA and working together. And that's been instrumental, I think, in talking to our colleagues about what digital poverty is, why it's important, how it's affecting people. So over the last 4 years, we've been on a bit of a journey in terms of kind of continuing that story. So we want to make sure that our colleagues aren't in that group of people who think that all of the interventions that happened through COVID fixed digital poverty. And it's quite easy, I think, for our colleagues who are perhaps on the front line as well. They're selling tech to people who are really passionate and excited about tech and have the money to pay for tech. Digital poverty can be a bit of a hidden poverty. So we really need to make sure they understand that just because you can't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. So we used COVID as, I guess, that kind of jumping point. And we've never stopped talking about it. I think people get a bit sick of me, so I've now had to rope in more people to talk about it, so it's not just me. And we've really been, like I said, been on this journey to really get kind of those hearts and minds going. So everyone in this room's an expert in digital poverty or in some kind, but I guess for some of our colleagues, some are going to really resonate with those stats, those figures, the very kind of academic side of it. Others need to hear the stories, but at the same time, we're very careful to make sure that we're respectful that those stories are someone's lives, someone's, identity. So we want to kind of maintain that animosity, but share the stories and impacts that we're having. So it's a bit of a mix. We talk about the stats, we talk about why Currys are helping, we talk about how we're helping, and then what's really great, I think, because it's been such a long partnership is, and you mentioned that our baby's now 3, we've been able to talk about the impact that Tech for Families had, so now they've got that sense of pride. So we're kind of always moving the story on. But one of the tools as well that's been fantastic is a DPA tool that you've got, which is that digital checklist. So I don't know, hopefully you're all aware of it. I mentally do it every time I come to something. So this morning I was like, oh yeah, I'd used my mobile phone to wake up, and then I checked how my sleep was, and then I had to do some of my children's homework, had to be submitted because I forgot that it had to go in today, and then I got directions to come here. And so we start a lot of our meetings with that digital checklist, and it just gets people to realise how much we rely on technology and what would happen if we didn't have it, and that is the reality for a lot of people. And I guess the final thing I'll say on it is our colleagues love it. They want to hear about it now, and that's a really privileged position it puts me in. I get invited to so many meetings. I don't enjoy public speaking, but I have to do it a lot. So yeah, people want to hear about it. They're really proud, and they want to share that news and share their experiences as well. So yeah, that drumbeat and just continuing to talk about it all the time is definitely key for our business.
And I think this is something that's really special about Currys, actually, in supporting this activity around digital poverty. It's not just a CSR activity. It's not just something that, oh, yes, that would be great to be involved in. Actually, it feels from out, a little bit outside, but working really closely with Catherine and Moira and others in the team, it feels embedded, and it feels actually a really natural part of your mission. And I guess you've sort of started to touch on this, and I'm just going to talk about the postcards in a bit, so you've had that one. But I'm really glad that some of those aids sort of help to kick off some of the conversations. But how else do you try to bring these issues sort of into everyday conversations inside what is actually a large and really quite complex organisation?
Yeah, I think one of the key things is I'm one person, and I have that privileged position of this is my job to do the good in the company. My role isn't to focus on profit, it's to be a responsible, make sure we're being a responsible business. but I'm not the one who delivers all of the work, and so we celebrate success. So, you know, we talked about Tech for Families. We use pennies donations to fund that. It raises almost £250,000 a year, and our store in Ayr has never been beaten on conversion. It's consistently the best store. So we shout about it, we celebrate it. Admittedly, I try to get a little bit of competitive spirit going in there so someone can take them down and raise more. So yeah, we really try to celebrate the success. We have a top-down approach as well, so it's really embedded across the business, but I know we're going to talk about it in a bit more detail in a bit, but our ExCo and all of our senior leadership team are really bought in as well. So they will lend their voice to the messaging, they will celebrate success in their team, and kind of call out great behaviour. And then I guess the other thing is, again, I'm one person, people would get sick of it if it was just me banging on about it all the time. So we encourage people to shout about it on their internal channels and LinkedIn. So, you know, a few weeks ago, we did some AI training, which has been quite topical today, but we did some AI training in Birmingham, and it was the colleagues who delivered that training who were shouting about what a great initiative it was, how they felt when they were giving back to the local community, but also the relationships they've built from that, what they've learned from going through the training themselves. And then again, that then gets people thinking that this isn't something we're doing that we want them to know about. It's something we're doing that they can actively get involved and have permission to think up new ideas and permission to take time out and embed what we're doing into their everyday work.
And it's something, again, I mean, I've been up to the Ayrshire store. Well, a couple of stores actually in Ayrshire, and I've met the team there, and you can tell that actually people are really proud that they are able to be part of this initiative and sort of talking to the local MP about it, talking to families who are being helped through the scheme. And that's great to see, because it's the Curry's colleagues in the stores who are, you know, our advocates who are helping people want to donate this money towards this scheme. And do you have any sort of examples or feedback from staff that really shows these messages are resonating?
Yeah. Our colleagues love it. So, as I said before, we've been on this journey for 4 years. More and more, I have teams coming to me with ideas and how they want to do it, and they can see the value in why we should tackle this. They can see how it links to their day-to-day jobs, and they've got the permission to implement schemes, and they want to do more. So we had the retail media team came to me over a year ago now saying, we've got empty space on our website. We would charge a company to advertise on it, but we could give space to the DPA. It's a really simple thing to do, but they came up with the idea, and I didn't have to go and ask, and I didn't have to chase and say, what are you going to do? They were asking how they could make it happen. I think the most exciting one recently as well is refurb. So our team that looks after refurbished mobile phones and laptops, refurb's such a big thing for us. They want to donate £1 for every sale so that it can go back into Tech for Families, which is getting refurb laptops into the hands of families who need it. Again, that was them coming to me. That's not me chasing people. So they're brilliant examples of how it's really resonating. But the other thing that we do to make sure that we're on the right track, like most companies, we survey all of our colleagues every year. We want to know what they're thinking about a number of factors, a lot of it business related. But we prioritise finding out how they feel about our social impact and our community work. And there is a dedicated question to, you know, are you proud about what we're doing around digital poverty? So our March results came in. The best you can get is 100, and we scored 82. It's gone up every year. That was a 2 points up on the previous year. But it's also 7 points above the national benchmark. So any other company that's doing some kind of social impact and how their customers and how their colleagues feel about it, our colleagues are even prouder than that. So it tells us that we're doing the right thing. We know that from the results of the work we're doing, but it's also really resonating with our colleagues. They're really proud, and so we're on the right track, and we just need to keep doing more. So yeah, really hearty to see. Obviously, further that we can go. So next year, I'm hoping to be able to tell you I'm at 90. But we've talked a lot about awareness and how we create awareness within curries, but obviously what the DPA needs is really deep engagement to be able to, get the needle moving even further. So it'd be interesting to know what approaches have helped you build that connection with public and the stakeholders as well.
So, I mean, we know that actually the awareness of digital poverty in the public isn't necessarily where we'd love it to be. And actually, I quote a little bit a stat that In-Kind Direct shared, which is around 18 months old now, I think. Charlotte, correct me if I'm wrong. But actually, only around 1 in 5 people out in the wild are actually aware of what digital poverty means. And that's self-reported. So, of course, what people think it means may not be actually accurate to that kind of full definition that we talk about of, whether that's devices, data, skills, confidence, safety, accessibility, all of these different facets. So the awareness actually remains an incredibly important jumping off point, because if we've got 80% of the public actually a bit hazy on it, then we've still got to meet that barrier first. Absolutely, as Katrin mentioned, we have these little postcards, and you can pick one up. If you haven't had one already, it's on the table outside. If you're online and you'd like some, absolutely let us know, and we'll make sure that we get that to you. They list out a lot of common things that you will do every day. And this is actually one of the best ways that we find of raising that level of understanding and getting people to want to engage. Because actually, it's only when you bring it home to people that they go, oh yeah, maybe actually it's not a luxury. It's not a, oh well, if you can afford a smartphone, you must be all right. Actually, if you didn't have that device and you didn't have that broadband when you got home and you didn't have the mobile data when the train's delayed to find out what's going to happen next or what route home you might take, actually, where would you be? You'd be in a lot of difficulty. The other thing that we're looking to do, and I'll probably return to this in the closing remarks, but with the new National Delivery and Advocacy Plan, if you flick through that, there are actions for government, there's actions for the third sector, there's actions for industry, there's also suggested actions for individuals. And this is something that people really want, especially in 2025. People don't just want to know about an issue. People don't even just want to give money to an issue. They want to be able to feel like they've done something. And if we look towards, for example, our individual device donation projects, people really, actually, it hits home. I can give this item and take this, and it is going to transform somebody's life by donating that. And I think it's that kind of opportunity that people have to actually engage with it, have to think about it, and be able to do something that's really starting to resonate with members of the public.
That 80% stat is quite shocking.
Hopefully it's going up. We need to do another survey.
Thank you. Are there particular communities or experiences that you feel are underrepresented at the moment with, in terms of conversations around digital inclusion?
So I think there's a few. One is that there is still a perception that if you've got a smartphone, you're digitally included. And this is a difficult one to get past, even within sort of government and arm's length bodies. A smartphone is seen as an easy way of getting people online. Now, okay, it is a way of getting people online, but actually there's an awful lot of things that we need to be able to do now that you can't achieve online. And in fact, the first piece of work we did on an academic kind of evaluation of tech for families was that difference between access via a mobile versus access via a laptop, and the change that parents saw, because actually a large number of the people that we support have never had anything, they've never had access to a device, but even amongst those parents whose children had been trying to manage doing homework on a mobile, 86% I think it was, said that their children were now more motivated to learn because they weren't trying to do homework on something fundamentally unsuitable. So there's still that debate. There's still the fact that, okay, we're here and we're talking on behalf of people who are experiencing digital poverty, but if you're offline, how do most campaigns get started these days? How do you hear about things? You hear about it on social media. You hear about people talking about their experiences on social media. If you're offline, you can't do that, so you're not in that place where people hear about these concerns. But there's also, as Natalie alluded to earlier, in terms of our response to the DSIT consultation, there's a lot of intersections. So actually really starting to shine the spotlight on some of these different aspects and where they come in, people who are homeless, people who are moving endlessly through transitory accommodation, people who are recently arrived and may have language barriers, and on and on and on and on. There are so many different facets that actually a part of our work in phase 2 is going to be about trying to draw some of this out. But returning to tech for families.
My favourite subject.
It's my favourite subject as well. I remember last year we had a question through about what was the single thing the DPA felt most proud about, and it was directed to me, and I was like, tech for families. Currys, though, is the delivery partner for this, and it has helped thousands of households, so that's, you know, multiplied many times over by how many people are in the house, access the devices and the support that they need to get online. What has this experience of collaboration looked like from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, it's been great. I think part of the reason it's been so, I don't know why I'm talking in past tense because it's still going, but it's a great collaboration. I think because we were already working together, so we already had an element of trust and balance and understanding what each of our area of expertise and capabilities were. So it really felt that it was co-created. So you understood our business, you understood where we were coming from. We had a shared vision in that we both want to eradicate or help eradicate digital poverty, but you already understood our business in terms of where we felt as a business we were best placed to use those capabilities and leverage all the kind of reach that we've got. But we were able to, I guess, trust the information you were giving. So you're the experts in digital poverty. If we'd come to you and said, we want to do this and we want to do it in that area, it's based on nothing. It's based on, you know, a want. Whereas you were able to come to us and say, this is what the need is, this is how much we think we can raise, and then therefore this is what the programme should look like. And it was very clear who was responsible for what, why we were responsible for each element, and therefore, you know, we could make a success of the programme. So that shared vision, the use of evidence then as well has been really key. So we went in, we launched the scheme, and we always knew there was going to be this proof of concept element. That's been fantastic. If it's shown it was the wrong intervention, that's fine. We'd pivot, we'd do something else. What's been great is it's shown it's a good intervention and we should continue with it. But that evidence and that proof point has been really helpful then in us being able to talk to colleagues and customers about it, and then to try and make changes to either generate more money. So Pennies is in store only at the moment, but this summer it's coming online, so we hope to double what we're raising. Or it's been helpful to kind of start those conversations about what we should be doing next in terms of, you've got a 12-month warranty at the moment, actually what happens after 12 months, and we can start those conversations internally. So that's been brilliant. I think the other thing that's been great is because of this long-standing or existing partnership we have, and because there really is buy-in from every level of the business, we were able to go through our channels of governance that we have to. There's an ESG committee, decisions go up to ExCo, you know, it's got to be done robustly. And there was no question of this being like, it's a 2-year partnership, fix it. There's this understanding that things change, things move on. There's no end date to our partnership, that, you know, the contract is ongoing. And so this understanding that we will constantly pivot, measure, deliver, and that buy-in's there at every level. Yeah, I mean, we know what we're responsible for. And I think the other thing that's lovely is that, again, our colleagues love it. So teams are involved that, you know, the teams that are responsible for any tech order that comes in and they send it out. But they know these ones. They know that they're going to people who wouldn't get that tech otherwise. And it creates this sense of pride for them. They love going into work on a day where that's the delivery they're going to be doing. And so I've got to give Glenn's team a big shout out because they're amazing. So yeah, it's just loved at every level. And the results have come through and shown that it was a brilliant scheme.
Absolutely, and I mean, I equally have to echo the shout out to Glenn, who I'd love to think he might be watching online, because actually his whole team, it really shows how much they actually do care about, about every single delivery, and it is quite amazing that any member of our team can email and sort of half an hour later, somebody's getting a phone call if there's been any kind of, you know, help needed, which is incredible. I guess what has motivated Currys to really throw so much behind this, not just the donations, but really the visibility across the organisation?
Yeah, it aligns perfectly with our corporate purpose. So Currys exists to help everyone enjoy amazing technology. That's, you know, our strapline. It's why we're here. But we recognise that not everyone can afford the technology. So that purpose becomes pointless if we're not going to do something to help those that can't afford it. And it just means that then this social impact, this doing good, is just so intrinsically woven into why we exist. So we want to be part of the solution. We want to work with the DPA and other organisations that can help us have that impact and make sure we are helping those people who need it. And I think as well, coming back to Tech for Families and the results that we had, I think it's 85% of the families receiving a laptop through Tech for Families have never had a keyboarded device in their home. So these are the people, you know, we want you to enjoy amazing technology. The people that can't get their hands on it otherwise, 85% is just staggering. And I think that is, again, one of those proof points that we use with our colleagues and in a lot of our comms, where it seems inconceivable that you can just never have had a laptop in your home. And these are the people we're helping, and it creates a sense of pride, and of course we want to continue, and we've helped over 2,000 families, and we just want to keep doing more. So.
And I know it is fantastic for members of the team, Natalie, Simeon, others. Every time we get an email from a parent saying how much this means to them, it really hits us. It's fantastic. And your executive team has also been playing an ever greater role in fundraising and in advocacy. What's some of that involved?
Yeah, it's brilliant. They love it, which is great. We've got everyone at Exco and all of our leadership teams, they are heavily invested, but we've definitely got some standout champions. So we've got Paula, who is our Chief Sustainability Officer. She's incredibly passionate about it, and as you'd hope, because we report into her for this work. But yeah, she's incredibly passionate. So she's got the whole of Exco later this month doing a 12-mile trek along the Jurassic Coast. I set them the challenge of raising £4,000. They smashed it in a week, so I think I should have gone higher. Lessons learned, but they're continuing to fundraise, so it's fantastic. And then even within Exco, we've got our COO. It will be her second trek that week for the DPA. Oh, so wow. She's challenged then her leadership team. So it just shows that it's this kind of top-down approach. Challenged her leadership team to raise £12,000 across the year. I think they're going to smash it. So the first thing they're doing is going from one of our lead stores along the canal. It's a 24-hour relay, and they want to see how close they can get to Liverpool. They're doing a golf day. They're doing an auction of promises. for our colleagues, it's brilliant because it just shows that they're leading by example. So as I said, they've got these treks, and throughout the summer, colleagues are also taking part of treks. We're having quite an active summer. Our retail leadership team do a trek every year. It seems like walking. Trek seems very big. So yeah, they lead by example, and I think what's great about it as well is obviously it's a serious issue. It's a serious topic. It has very serious impacts on people's lives. And so we like to get that across with the comms, but that doesn't mean that we can't have fun whilst we try to raise awareness internally and raise funds. And then it has knock-on benefits. It helps with well-being, it helps with kind of team building, and it just helps people want to do more. So yeah, it's been perfect, but yeah, definitely great to work for an organisation where you've got everyone from the CEO and Exco right down to, you know, the store staff and me doing various things. So it's fantastic.
I feel like you've got to be very fit to be a Curry's Exco member. That's my main takeaway.
Yeah, and maybe I'll set them different challenges as well. We'll test just how fit they are. Yeah. But so, you know, we've talked about Tech for Families. Obviously, you've got lots of other proof of concept and other schemes that you do as well. And we love sharing the stories of the impact amongst Curry's colleagues of actually what does that mean. And so throughout all of your work, you'll have seen so much more impact, so many stories about first-hand experience of what digital poverty actually means to people and what digital exclusion looks like on a day-to-day level. So is there anything that these initiatives have taught you about what works, and are there gaps remaining that still need to be addressed?
Yes, definitely. I mean, there's so many stories that I could list off where we've had incredible responses from people sharing the impact that has had on their family. Whether that is young people who have been, you know, really starting to slide down at school, not achieving what they need to be, and then actually they get the machine and then suddenly they can access a range of different resources that actually change how they educate, because we know that, you know, traditional education doesn't always work for everyone, and especially with more of it going online. We have heard about people who've been able to access mental health support that they just never realised was available to them because actually their child has got a laptop through a scheme. We have a Tech for Young Carers project, which is funded by E2BN. You might have seen the leaflets outside, and that's running in Cambridgeshire. And what that means for some of the young carers who actually can be living quite an isolated life. You know, there's a lot of stress placed upon them and not necessarily that much opportunity to engage with other people who may be in a similar position to them. Having access to the internet, having access to be able to build those connections, really, really important for their own well-being, and indeed accessing services, and dare we say it, even accessing fun. You know, we talk about digital as needing to be able to find work, complete education, access healthcare, access banking. It's fun. It's fine to want to have some entertainment and gaming and watch TV and all of these other things that we all want to do, so why shouldn't anybody else want to? But there are still absolutely gaps, and part of that is about being able to make the inroads into communities, so that is about building trust and having those local figures who people will go, free laptop if I join all my details. Could be a bit too good to be true. But actually, if you've got those local people who are able to check out the DPA and go, yep, okay, they seem solid, this is actually worth completing, and then you will receive a laptop at the other end of it. It's how you get the message out there. So I do bang on about this a bit, but you can't advertise support to get online, because that's not where the people are who need the help. You might think that's obvious, but worryingly, it's not necessarily always that obvious. And then there is just also the sheer demand. You know, there is so much more. There are so many people that we would love to be able to help. And actually, it is a privilege to be able to help so many people through Tech for Families and indeed our other schemes. But there's always more that we can do. There's always more areas that we can go to. There's always different demographics of people who need that support. So yeah, lots of gaps, lots of opportunity.
Yeah. I think that trust was a very interesting point, and I think kind of comes into partnerships generally. So, you know, we've got a partnership that we think is very meaningful. You've got other partnerships that are very meaningful. But I guess, how do you ensure that they're not just symbolic and that they're delivering real and lasting outcomes?
I think this is something that's been incredibly important with the partnership we have with Currys. It has that longevity, which is incredibly important. Absolutely, you know, if somebody walks up to us today and says, let's do a scheme and it's going to help 20 people in this area, of course we will want to help 20 people in that area. But what is incredible about a long-term partnership is it enables us to be able to plan. It gives confidence to the people who we're going to be helping. It gives a certain level of, again, confidence to people that we're working with Currys and they're getting really high quality kit that's being delivered actually really respectfully. It comes through exactly like you'd ordered something online. It doesn't feel like you're receiving a handout. You're getting a laptop. And actually, we get lots of people saying, oh, this is going to be a great present for my child for their birthday, for Christmas. That's incredibly important. But there's also the expertise that we get from Currys as well. So it's not just that, you know, we get the donations and that's fantastic and then we buy laptops and send them out. There's a lot of help that goes into helping us choose the right devices. There's a lot of help that goes into the logistics of that, you know, sending thousands of laptops out. I would not personally be able to sit in the unit and do that all on my own. So there's that kind of side. And there's the technical help as well. So if something does go wrong, you know, Glenn's team, who we just gave that little shout out to, will be there. And sometimes it's not that something's gone wrong with the laptop. Sometimes it's that, you know, we've provided people with a lot of resources and information about where they can get training. But if a box has come up and you don't know what to do about it, actually you need that help. So also, I think for us, though, what's incredible about the Currys partnership is it is built in to your strategy. It isn't just about the delivery. It stretches out into being a founding partner, into the public affairs and advocacy goals. So many different elements is what brings this together to be truly impactful and not purely just a delivery project. I guess actually that takes us nicely on to the Charter for Digital Inclusion. And I hope that if you haven't picked up a copy, you're going to pick one up on the way out. So Currys signed the Charter early on. What prompted that and how did that inform some of the wider commitments that are coming through now?
Well, it just made complete sense, first and foremost. As we've said, we were a founding partner. We've got this long-term partnership that we don't intend on ending anytime soon. You have this charter that links to, you know, the first, what we're here for, you know, the first goals that we should be setting out. And so it would be a very strange move if we didn't feel that we were able to commit to any of those charter points. So it made complete sense. But as we've talked about as well, helping to eradicate digital poverty is one of our ESG priorities, and it feeds right up all the way into, you know, our overarching vision, and it's really embedded within the business. So the charter points actually aligned quite perfectly with what we want to do, what we want to deliver, and where we want to go. So, yeah, made sense and kind of, yeah, closely linked to the work that we're doing. Where it's been really useful now is it's helped, I guess, helped guide our vision. So over the years, I think what we're doing, both together, but then as Currys kind of more widely within digital poverty or digital inclusion, we want to do more. And so by looking at the charter commitments and seeing actually where we think we're best placed, you know, which ones make most sense for our business, we can kind of, you know, work out where we're going to go. So one of the ones we want to do was about working in partnership. So we, earlier in the year, did a scheme with Deloitte, who I know are, again, a big supporter of the DPA, where we wanted to encourage their colleagues, there's about 25,000 of them, to do a tech amnesty. So we've got a scheme called Cash for Trash. We'll take anything, as long as it's got a socket or a battery, we'll take it, and we will we'll get rid of it safely, whether that's recycling or, in the case of laptop, phone, tablet, our first port of call is, can it be reused? Secondly, can it be harvested? So if 2 laptops come in, can we use one to extend the life of the other? Our last resort is to recycle, and I know that's been a theme we've talked about today. So we worked with Deloitte with that, so people could go through their drawer and go, oh, there's 5 phones in there, I should really do something with them. And so they, their colleagues knew that those pieces of equipment will be reused if they can be, or will be disposed of safely. So we're working in partnership in that way. We've started working with Neighbourly so that we can take the digital skills that our colleagues have and deliver those skills to community organisations or wherever there's a need. That's really exciting because Neighbourly is needs-led, so it's not us saying, oh, we've got a team of 5 who, and again, we've talked about it before, a team of 5 who want to go and paint a youth centre. Oh no, we wouldn't paint our own lounges, but of course you want us to. So we don't do that. It has to be digital skills related, but also it's that organisation that might say, actually, we don't know how social media works, or we don't know how Excel works, or we don't know what AI is, and then we can match people with the opportunities. And again, the other one we're looking at is about awareness raising. So we're in 300 stores across the UK, we're online, we've got a huge social media presence, and it seems easy that we should be able to really talk about what we're doing. Yeah.
Amazing. And are there any of the specific charter principles like affordability, accessibility, accountability that are feeling particularly important to Currys from a business perspective?
Yeah, I mean, we're a tech retailer, so of course affordability is huge. Again, it's been mentioned earlier, tech is not cheap. It's an expensive item. It's also incredibly low margin. So what's not within our gift is to go, we can slash it, it's half the price. We're not dealing with that kind of margin. But what we are looking at is, how can we make it as affordable as possible? That can be responsible credit. It can be through refurb, which is cheaper. But also, because we're selling refurb, but we're also delivering it through Tech for Families, we're showing that it's a really good product. It's not like a second choice. It's a lot of people's first choice. So we're trying to make sure that as many people as possible aren't priced out. That then means schemes like Tech for Families are reaching those people who genuinely can't afford anything at all. So affordability, yeah, really key. And then accessibility as well is another big one for us. I've seen the 1 minute sign go up, so I might leave it there and say, yes, it's very big for us.
And I guess to finish up, the End Digital Poverty Day happens every year on the 12th of September. And Currys is sponsoring the gala reception on that day again, where we will also recognise this year's recipients of the new UK Digital Inclusion Awards. What does this sponsorship mean to Currys?
Awareness is key. Awareness is so important. So it provides an opportunity for us to show everyone that we're behind it, that we're supportive of the DPA. But I think the other amazing thing about it that we love is that there is so many examples of really good things that are happening. Obviously, Currys think we should win across the board and what we're doing is amazing. But no, everyone should be sharing what they're up to so that we can be inspired, we can replicate, and it just gives a great platform and a great voice for everyone to talk about what they're doing. And there might be some ideas we can steal and embed into our business, so it's exciting.
Well, we're very grateful, but we're also very excited for the awards because absolutely, as you've just said, I think this is a wonderful opportunity to amplify some of the fantastic work that is happening across the whole of the UK and actually inspire some people. Actually, let's steal the ideas. I don't think anyone would feel that territorial, hopefully, over helping more people get online. Thank you so much, Katrin. I will just ask if we've got any quick questions for Katrin, either in the room or online. I can see one, if we can get a microphone.
Hi, Rachel Doe. I work for Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council. We're talking a lot in our team at the moment, and I work within economic development, about social value and a social value proposition. And I wonder what your views were on who is best placed to take ownership of that type of proposition. Should it be led by third sector? Should it be led by the public sector? Is it a joint approach? What resonates most with business as far as you're concerned? And who would give it the best chance of success?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. So I think we're perhaps quite early on in our thinking, so we're not quite at the social value level at the moment, just because it requires so much extra thinking, extra kind of delving into the results. But then I know you've got teams like Virgin Media O2 who have a whole team that are dedicated to social value, and they sit alongside a kind of social impact team. But yeah, and then it's just that it can be so linked to. So we do have a B2B team, and obviously social value then forms part of the tenders that they're going after. Yeah, it's really difficult to know. I think it has to be a kind of working together. So in terms of like some of the results that you're going to need to see, the business might not be best placed to go to those end users and get all the information that's required in. So it depends, like if the business is leading the initiative, or is the business doing an initiative through a third party. I think it's going to just depend so much on actually what you're developing and what you're doing and how. I don't know if that's helped.
And certainly it is an incredibly powerful way, whether it's central government, local government, health authorities, whoever else, being able to leverage that funding and being able to unlock a new means of working with charities. It's something that we do at the DPA. You know, if a business has a need to be able to deliver that social value project, there's a lot of places that we're already working, and there's probably a way that we can help in being able to do that. I think we're going to wrap up this session before we get the end of session sign again. Thank you again, Catherine. Thank you so much for Curry's ongoing support, and thank you for joining us today.
No, thanks for having me.
Just to finish us up, and please do, when you leave, I'm going to give you some homework, but your immediate homework is to make sure you grab some of the food that's out there, because otherwise it's all going to go to waste. And do also pick up copies of reports, of leaflets. We've got little paper carrier bags out there for you that hopefully will survive the rain, because we really do want you to be able to share some of what you've learned about today with colleagues. So please do make sure that you grab that. We heard about quite a few different areas of digital poverty today, and I think we really had a bit of a focus on skills this time round. And I really did like something that Lex said, you know, we've got to give people the opportunity to learn. We've got to let them learn and not get in the way. We do also, though, need to remember that resilience doesn't necessarily come naturally when it comes to learning about tech. Just because you've shown somebody how to use an app doesn't mean that they're now going to be a world expert and feel super confident getting online. And it was something when we were in Northern Ireland a few weeks ago that really came through very, very, very strongly. A lot of people have a fear of tech. You know, some of us have grown up with a fiddle around and find out kind of, you know, basis for learning new platforms. Have a go on it, what's the worst that can happen? On the other hand, there's a lot of people who've been told, no, don't do that. If you do that, you'll get scammed or you'll break it or lots of things could go wrong. We have to build resilience into our training, and we have to try and remove some of that fear of technology. We do also need to make sure that we are just having those conversations, as again came up on the skills panel, and again Natalie said, just to understand actually how people feel in our immediate lives, in our immediate spheres. We make a lot of assumptions actually about the people we know, much like a whole range of societal issues. It is actually, BT used to say it, it's good to talk. We should actually, you know, have these conversations and find out, do people have an issue with getting online? Is there a particular concern? Is there a blocker for them? Is there something that they've actually just not really wanted to say or admit to? But actually, if somebody offers them a bit of help, they might actually really quite appreciate that. So I am going to give everyone a little bit of homework, because that's what you came down to Portsmouth for, isn't it? Point one, if you haven't yet signed the charter that we were just referring to, again, you'll find some paper copies outside, and I know that we're going to get a link on the live stream so that you can find that. By signing the charter, you will also automatically enter, if you want to, you can tick the box not to if you don't want to, the UK Digital Inclusion Awards, because we really want to gather up all of these amazing things that are happening all across the UK. Whether you're from industry, whether you're from local government, whether you're from a tiny voluntary organisation, whether you're from a big international charity, whatever sector you might be representing, if you're doing something, get signed up to the charter, tell us about it, share that, let's amplify it, and let's all stand together in the shared mission. As you look through the National Delivery and Advocacy Plan, and again, if you're here, make sure that you've got that hard copy with you. As you flick through, you're going to find some actions. So you're going to find a lot of actions that we are going to take the lead on. If there's one in particular, or maybe a few, that you'd like to work with us on, please come and find one of us or drop us an email. We'd love to do that. But then you're going to find actions for you. So there's actions for government, there's actions for the third sector, there's actions for industry, and there is actions there for individuals. Just listing out a few of them, in case you've not had time to take a look at this yet, and you're hopefully going to sit there and go, actually, you know what, I could do that one. Share a resource. Find a resource and share it with somebody who needs it. Upskill yourself. Take a micro-qualification through a platform like IDEA. You can sign up. There's little things that you can do while you're cooking a pot of pasta or while you're sitting on the bus where you can learn something, and then that'll help you help somebody else at some point. Sign up for becoming a digital champion. We've got Digital Unite in the room. Sign up and be part of this. Sign up to help people around you get online. Or donate a device. If you do have the proverbial smartphone sitting in a drawer, give it to us. We'll get it sorted out. We'll give it to somebody who needs it. Even better if you've got lots of them. If anyone who's watching and you're going through the whole Windows 10 refresh situation and going, I've been told these aren't good for anyone. Trust me, they are. Please let us have them. If you are a corporate, again, obviously sign the charter. I'm going to keep banging that drum. But think about some of the other actions that are listed out in the NDAP. These are things like actually look at your social value policy and think with colleagues, think with your procurement team, how you can build digital inclusion into that. It is an amazing way of unlocking funding. Think about how you can adopt inclusive design in terms of your own website and your own digital platforms. Actually, think about that. Open the conversation. You're probably not going to get it done tomorrow. This is a long road. But you can start those conversations. At some point, you are going to update your website. That would be a great time to build that in. So take a look through the NDAP. Don't just see it as a list of things that somebody else is going to do. Take a look at it and think about actually, while you're on the way home, what is it you can do? Finally, if there's any other ways that you are interested in getting involved in the activity of the Digital Poverty Alliance, whether that's partnership, whether that's advocacy, whether it's joining one of our networks, so our community circle, our local authority network, or our industry forum, again, if you're here, come and grab one of us. If you're online, drop us an email and we'll be delighted to hear from you. But again, if you've been online all of this time, that has been a marathon, so thank you very much for joining us all afternoon. And if you've come down to Portsmouth, have a safe trip home. Thank you very much.